I'm Stephen Lacey. I'm Managing Director of The Outsiders, and today I'm going to talk to you about the industry's unconscious bias. And by the industry, I mean people from both the agency side and the client side. And actually, I think we could broaden it out even further than that. I think it's the marketing industry's unconscious bias. And actually, I think we could even broaden it out even more and say it's a large proportion of this country's unconscious bias. And it's great because becoming in a much better place in terms of diversity and inclusion, and we're thinking about things much more than we ever have, and we're making change. And it's great to see brands like Unilever really kind of challenging kind of negative kind of stereotypes, from the idea that Romanians are all kind of thieves and kind of beggars and drug dealers, or Russians are women are always kind of prostitutes, or Polish are kind of the builders kind of taking our job, or lesbian women are butch, or Indians are good at maths, or disabled people have a disability, myself, kind of helpless victims and can't get jobs and have no sex life and need to be pitied. So it's fantastic that these stereotypes are being challenged and are really important. But I think we have to be careful. And I think we have to be careful because as we challenge these kind of stereotypes and move away, there's a danger we can create new stereotypes. So classic example is, as we've moved away from kind of butch lesbians, what we've now got is very kind of pretty white young middle class women with kind of tattoos, kind of who don't really kind of smile, or you kind of get the androgynous or the kind of the sporty lesbian coming through. So we're creating new stereotypes, and the work with Dove was absolutely fantastic and kind of a game changer. But now what we see is a lot of kind of bigger bodied white women that are always kind of happy. And it's interesting, recently I spoke to an expert in race relations, and they were fantastic. And they talked about how after Black Lives Matter, advertising agencies, ads, programming, there's much more representation, which is fantastic. But if you kind of look at ads, now nearly all ads have mixed race couple, and what you'll have is a white woman with a black man. So we're kind of creating new stereotypes. But there's one audience, and there's one audience that I research a lot around. So I've done a lot around COVID, Age of Rage, did work around Brexit, the crumbling of the kind of red wall, and that's the white working class. And for this presentation, I'm going to do this through the lens of the white working class. I'm doing more work on other ethnic minorities, but in 20 minutes, I just wanted to really kind of focus on this audience, because I think there's a lot of stereotypes that emerge around this audience that kind of need to kind of be challenged. So often they're kind of the shameless, they're kind of Vicky kind of Pollard, they're kind of poverty and kind of the poverty porn programs that you kind of see. You kind of get the stereotypes. It's the girl that's kind of very kind of loose and very easy, the kind of dumb kind of blonde that's very kind of with kind of big breasts, the happy chappy kind of builder who's the life and the soul of the party. So there's many stereotypes, and I don't think we really challenge them, and I don't think we really think about them that much. And I think as an industry, a lot of this comes from kind of prototypicalities. And if prototypicality is really interesting, so I think the best way to describe it is, if someone says, Steve, think of a bird, I always think of something that kind of flies. I wouldn't think of a penguin. And in terms of kind of prototypicalities, when we kind of think of the working class, there's certain things that kind of emerge. The first one that is that they're always kind of in kind of poverty. So they're living in kind of ghetto states up in the kind of north. They kind of have no kind of money. It's kind of the teenage mum, always kind of in poverty, using kind of food banks. I think the next one is the chavs, kind of hoodies, the feral kind of kids, the people that are terrible on kind of council estates, riding their bikes ups and downs, the men that kind of drinking in kind of streets, the kind of benefit kind of scrounger kind of comes through here. I think the next one is the health time bomb. It's kind of those that kind of eat just crap, they're just eating KFC all day kind of long. They don't care about their health. They're costing NHS money. They're smoking all the time. They're just drinking all the time. I think the next one is this thick and kind of stupid. And I see this. I'm connected to lots of market researchers, and I remember after Brexit, it was like they're just people calling them thick. They're just like, these are just thick, stupid people. They don't know what they're doing, just stupid. They just destroyed the kind of country. They've just got no kind of brains. More or less, why should we even give them the right to kind of vote? And that's extreme. But I have even seen that kind of pushed around as a kind of theory. The next one is it's kind of the drinkers. You know, it's the Newcastle kind of lasses that kind of go out in the kind of cold and wear whatever they want and just getting pissed all the time and kind of sexing the kind of alleys. Or it's kind of the guys on kind of holiday that we kind of want to avoid because they kind of give Britain a kind of bad name, and you kind of like, they're not really part of us. They're just disgusting. They're terrible. They're just really anti kind of British. They give Britain a really bad name. And I think the last one is kind of, it's the far right. It's kind of that extremism. They're, you know, all white working class are racist people. And it's interesting when you kind of look at stereotypes and stereotype. This is a stereotype model that I often kind of use. And I think there's different dimensions. So it's something you have a cold relationship with, but you think is good at what they do. You often have fear, sometimes envy. So in a good example of that would be the Jewish community under Nazi Germany, how awfully they were kind of portrayed and put into this kind of space, or the Asians under Idi Amin were placed into this space as well. The next one, you have cold, but you don't think they're very good at what they kind of do. Then you tend to have contempt, and I think a lot of race relations in America has been based around this. Then you kind of have a warmer feeling towards something, but you just think they're incompetent. Then you tend to have pity and sympathy for those kind of people. I see this that I'm a disabled person, as I mentioned, and you know, I'll be with someone else, and sometimes people will talk to that person, not talk to me. And people, I've even had people come up to me and say, "Oh, it's so sad that you're kind of disabled. I feel really sorry for you," or "You're a good-looking guy. It's a shame you're kind of disabled." And the last place is kind of warm and competent, and that's kind of pride and admiration. And even that can kind of get exaggerated. You see it with kind of disability, where it kind of goes into that inspiration problem. But I think it's a good place to start moving things to. And with the white working class, what you see is that you see a lot of cold and competent, not so much envy, obviously, but much of fear. There's kind of those racists that are kind of rioting in the street and causing lots of kind of tension and negative kind of feelings. You can have a cold and kind of incompetent kind of feeling as well, where you just kind of they're thick and kind of stupid kind of people. They're the kind of incompetent people that kind of sold out the country. You can have the pity and sympathy, which I see a lot kind of emerge. So kind of feeling sorry for them because they're living on kind of estates, but they're not very good at what they do. But very rarely do we kind of get pride and admiration. We're starting to a little bit more through kind of the key workers and all the work around kind of key workers. But I think it needs to kind of be pushed much further, and it needs to be kind of maintained. And these kind of prototypicalities are a problem. They're a problem for the marketing industry, and they're a problem for the Market Research Society. And I see it played out a lot. So often you see people play this audience into a poverty space. So as an advertising agency, they're doing a workshop, we're talking about the working class, and they're like, yeah, we want to target the working class kind of right in the north and kind of the Midlands, and what we're going to do is we're kind of going to use kind of Stormzy because they're all living in poverty and they're all in kind of food banks. I was like, no, you haven't got this audience quite right. I think clients like to overestimate their audience. So they nearly always like to say that it's kind of ABC1, and very rarely would they actually admit that it's a C2, D, and almost definitely not an E kind of audience. I've seen it as well where clients can even use terrible kind of language. So I remember a big global brand saying to me, "Steve, can we call working class, can we call them low-skilled workers?" And I was like, not really, it's probably not a great idea. I've seen research agencies deny an audience that exists. So I remember being in a meeting, and it's for a gambling client, and the research agency turned around and said, you know, they're not really going to get your ideas. They're not very good at innovation, are they? So they're not really going to understand things. So maybe you should take them off the sample. The client turned around and said, "You're excluding 50% of our base. That is just absolutely kind of ridiculous." I think also we can get the flip side. the feeling that they don't kind of matter. So they're kind of a bit of a kind of burden, or it doesn't really matter what they kind of do or what they kind of think. We can even get the feeling, which is the flip side of the poverty argument, as actually they're not really in poverty. And we have to be careful, because in some pockets and some groups of white working class boys, they have the second lowest educational levels after that of Romania. So they need help and they need kind of guidance. And when you look at university stats, some of the white working classes can be some of the lowest in the country, more than any other diverse group. And I do class this as the biggest diverse group that we never kind of talk about. I think sometimes we can have this myth that this is about the North or kind of Birmingham, and London has it as well. So you go to places like Feltham and Eltham, and they have more in common with the North than they would do with Shoreditch. And you see that with millennials. It's like, yeah, let's just talk about millennials. Now, an 18-year-old in Feltham has more in common with an 80-year-old than they do with an 18-year-old in Shoreditch or Hoxton. I think the next thing is we can just not really take into considerations this this audience, and so it can be like, well, we don't really need to help them that much in market research, or if we do help them in the kind of market research industry, you know, they still need to have a degree, or they still need to have kind of A levels, as if that's kind of the only way you can kind of develop kind of insights. And then still, shockingly, we still see researchers who deny that there's class in the UK, which I find absolutely kind of outstanding. And it's an important audience. And it's an audience that matters. As I said, it's the largest diverse group, and it's a group we're kind of ignoring. Some people say put it at 25%. Some people say it's up to 60%. Vowels will say it's up to 60%. I think it's somewhere kind of in between. There are pockets, as we talked about, not all, but there are pockets of poverty where it's getting worse and worse. And in the future, that's where the biggest problems, social problems, are going to lie. And we're not helping that. They voted for Brexit. I'm sure some of you didn't like that, but a lot of that was a protest movement. And that was a protest movement of 20 years of not being kind of listened to. Most importantly, they're probably your clients, customers. You go to Bluewater, you go to the big shopping centres, look who's buying your products. It's often C2DEs, but we still exclude them because we want to talk about ABC ones. They're probably also your clients' employees as well. And as Economist talks about, this is the audience that hold the keys to number 10. But we can also learn a lot from them. And I think that's important. Every audience you talk to, you learn from. And we can learn a lot. So there's a lot of respect there for others and for themselves. And the whole basis is built around respect. This is an audience that's always wants respected, but isn't that much now. There's a strong degree around kind of family and decency and fairness, and community is the bedrock. COVID middle class to discover community. Community has always been there for this kind of audience. So how do we kind of research the working class? And this is part of a much kind of longer kind of deck. So I'm just going to do some of the top lines. I think the first one is to acknowledge there's kind of a breadth of kind of audience. So I say there's 3 different kind of audiences, there's probably more. So I talk about the salt of the earth, very traditional working class, black and white, Protestant kind of work ethic, often haven't been outside for 3 generations, more than 5 miles from their kind of home. Then we kind of have the strugglers, generally earn less than £10,000 a year, live in poverty, will often use the kind of food bank. Then we have the aspirational working class, similar background to the salt of the earth, but where the salt of the earth with their children will often just want their children to be happy, but won't push them so much in terms of education because they don't want them to leave them and their community. It's quite dark rooted. The aspirational working class are pushing their children more into education, will be adopting more middle class kind of interests. I think one of the important things is treat it like an international project. So when you do research into this audience, if I'm doing stuff internationally, like if I'm going to Russia, I'll delve into the culture, I'll have the right people off the ground, and I won't just go to Moscow and St. Petersburg. And I think you need to do similar things. There's very, very few people from working class backgrounds in the industry. So it's a blind spot, as people like Ian Murray at House 51 and Reach constantly kind of talk about. So As it's an audience you don't really understand, you need to delve into culture, read reports, read academic reports, speak to experts, have right people on the ground. Recruiters are fantastic. I've got some fantastic recruiters, but sometimes they can't get you the kind of ease. So I have people on the States that can snowball and find the right kind of people. Get off the beaten track. You know, Bolton doesn't have Malmaison, but it's still, Rochdale doesn't have Malmaison, but we don't have to keep doing London, not Manchester, Birmingham. We can go to new areas and we'll learn new things. And I do every time I go to new areas. It's fascinating. I think, except there's a tapestry of different kind of views, and sometimes these will be views that might make you quite kind of uncomfortable. So they can dislike some of the language around kind of diversity. They can be anti-Black Lives Matter, and I'm seeing more and more a rise of conspiracy theories. They're talking more and more about kind of Pizzagate and kind of paedophiles. So there is a tapestry of views, but the important thing is to understand why. So they dislike the language around diversity because things that they find really kind of precious and sacred, like banter, are kind of being challenged. For instance, they feel that they can't express their views. They feel like it's someone else telling them what to do, and they don't really know when they meet people of difference what to say. They can be anti-Black Lives Matter, and part of that reason was because the week before they'd been wound up by Dominic Cummings, and suddenly there were 1,000 people on the streets, and they thought that was unfair on the NHS. They also didn't like seeing the statues pulled down because it's an audience that doesn't think in the future, because the future seems awful. The present's really difficult, so they look back in the past. So that statue is a symbolism of the past that makes them feel safe in really, really difficult times. And the rise of conspiracy theories is, the bigger the issue, the bigger conspiracy theories. People feel powerless. People feel helpless. So they need big answers. And it's interesting, I spoke to over 80 people about COVID, and only 2 people believed it's from a bat, because you wouldn't link it to a bat. And put their stories at the centre. So this is a person that was abused as a child. She was forced into kind of sex work. Not to say that it's only working class that get abused, but I think the stories are really important, telling the story. A partner sent her drugs from prison. She still thinks her prison story. This is one of the worst stories I've ever heard. This is another girl called Chantel. She's from a family of sex, has 2 children, sold her home. Earned £200,000 on her house and spent it in 3 years. So, and she tries to go to Turkey once a kind of year when she could. This is another guy who runs a building company. So he earns over 200,000 a year. They're not all in poverty. Some working class can earn more, and that's a big element we kind of mistake we make. And he runs and funds a boxing club. But the important thing is to tell their stories and put their stories at the centre. And don't overplay empathy. We really do overplay everything. I think we missell it to our client. In a 1 hour depth with a woman who's been abused, or even a 1 hour depth with someone who's become bankrupt, I don't have empathy. I do good research and I'm respectful and I listen to what they're saying, but I don't have empathy. What we need to do more of is we need to listen, speak to more people, listen and look for trends that are going through the different kind of transcripts, but not overplay the sense that we have empathy. Because the problem is, when we think we have empathy, we then go back, we do our analysis and we're like, if I was in their shoes, what would I do? And the answer is, if I was in their shoes, I'll educate them. And it's the most annoying, patronizing thing. It's like bringing them up to their level. It's how we used to see people in the slums. It's how the upper classes used to see people in the slums. And we're bringing them up to our level. And as someone really intelligent, and who I really respect, Conrad from Craft, says, it's really how kind of missionaries used to treat Africans. And we still do the same thing. We still have that cultural kind of imperialism mindset towards the working class. And lastly, challenge your own kind of biases. And I think importantly, let's look at recruitment as well and get better people in. And people like Ian at House 51 and Reach have really kind of been pushing that. But before that, what we can do is challenge our biases. Thank you very much for listening.